Started now. I see about 10 people are on.
Recording in progress. Welcome, everybody. We are just about to get started. What we're looking at here is we will be starting pretty shortly. We have about 30 attendees. We had about 80 registrants, so we'll give it a few more minutes till everyone has a chance to get off. Welcome, everyone who's joined us. We have about 38 attendees so far. We will give it a few more minutes just to make sure we have everyone joining us. Thanks for coming, everyone, signing in on your Wednesday evening. Thanks for those of you who've just joined. We have about approaching 50 attendees. We'll give it a few more minutes. We had close to 80 registrants for this evening's session. Thanks again. Just give it one more minute and we'll start the session. Good evening, everyone. While we wait, I hope you can see myself right now and some of the other members of the project team that are joining us, as well as the presentation. The first slide is up. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please send a message through the chat function, which is just, you can click on the chat function, it'll open, and you can type your question. We can troubleshoot any technical difficulties you might be having. Okay, we're just over 50 attendees. So Kathy, I think we'll start because we have a couple housekeeping items in the interest of time first. And as people join, they can ask questions or chat with us through the chat function. So good evening, everyone. We have just over 55 of us now. And as those of you who are joining, just a reminder, if you have any questions about the presentation or need any tech support, just message us through the chat function and we can kind of walk you through things. I'll introduce myself quickly. My name is Martha McClary, and I will be one of your facilitators this evening. I'm an engagement specialist with B&A Studios. Thanks again for joining us for the 2501 Richmond Virtual Information Session. Tonight is the virtual information session. I know some of you are also registered for our in-person session tomorrow at the Community Association. The content you're seeing tonight will be consistent, slightly different format, but the same content we're sharing at tomorrow's session. We understand that a virtual information session may be new to some, and we want to make this as simple as possible. So please do message us if you're having any difficulty at all. And I'll start with a few housekeeping items. This session is being recorded, but all participants are muted and your microphones are off and your camera's off. So if you have any questions, reach out through the chat function and we'll be responding to them as we go. The presentation is being recorded so that we can post it on the website. So if you're not able to stay the whole time, or if you know any attendees who or any community members who aren't able to attend, you can share the link. We'll be posting this on our website. I'm just going to message the project team. I'm getting a little bit of feedback. So just to make sure the whole project team is on mute at the moment, just a little reminder because I'm hearing myself. Thanks, guys. So we're going to start the presentation tonight. We'll walk through the content and the project team will, Kathy will be leading that. To just provide an overview on the application and the project. And we're going to open it up to questions at the end, but please do post your questions at any point this evening through the chat function, and then we'll just start answering them at the end. We will answer as many questions as we can get to this evening, and we're excited to do that. I want to thank everyone who has submitted feedback so far. We've received over 30 emails from the community so far. We have read them. I want to reassure everyone we have read them, and we are currently compiling the list of the comments, the questions, the suggestions we have received, and we will be responding to all of that feedback as well as the feedback we have tonight in a couple methods. There will be an engagement summary that will be shared and prepared with the city, but we're also going to be working to develop an FAQ quite quickly here. We have a lot of questions that have been posed to the team, so we'll be working through that and circulating it back to participants. I also want to extend just a thanks again, because we know that you're taking time out of your very busy schedules. We understand that this land use proposal represents a very significant change, and we want to ensure that we are sharing accurate information with all of you and responding to your questions. So there's going to be more outcomes coming from this session as well as tomorrow night's session, and we'll be sharing some more details about how you can provide your feedback with us at the end of the presentation this evening. I am going to throw things over to Kathy now, who's going to continue to take us through the session. Please do reach out if you have any questions with the tech, or if you're not able to see something. And as we're going through the content, please don't hesitate to just drop those questions in the chat function for the question and answer period. So over to you, Kathy. Did you want to do a round of introductions for everyone?
I'll probably do that. Introduce who Minto is and then explain who our team is. So thank you, Martha, and welcome, and thank you for joining us tonight and taking the time out of your evening. We know evenings are precious. You might be wondering, who is Minto? Minto Communities. Minto Communities is a division of the Minto Group, which was established in 1955. Minto Communities is a family-owned, fully integrated real estate development, construction, and management company with operations in Ottawa, Toronto, Calgary, and South Florida, and has been instrumental in the design and construction of 100,000 homes. An industry leader, Minto Communities is known for high quality and sustainable urban developments. We have a number of representatives here tonight from Minto. We've got Nora, Alex, Charles, Tom, and Kendall. And you might hear from them later when we start answering questions. In addition, you have myself and Vern Hart. We are partners and planners from BNA, and Amrit Upal from Bunton Associates, our transportation engineer, working on the technical elements of the application. So as Martha noted, our goal this evening is to provide information about the planning applications we have submitted to the city last week and describe the process for engagement and public feedback. It is not lost on our team that this site has played a key role in the community for decades. Some of you might have had your children attend this school. You might have attended, came for parent-teacher interviews, performances, or even kids' sporting events, not to mention graduation. Once upon a time, there were buses and teachers and parent drop-offs, kids parking in the area, and lots of laughter and giggles in the field over lunchtime or gym class. Your kids might have played in the fields, or you walk your dog on the evenings or weekends now through the green space. We know that while it plays, it has also played a part and is also currently in an unfortunate state and more of a burden and risk than the gathering space it once was. There is now an opportunity for redevelopment, and Minto is looking to create a well thought out development that will benefit the community for years to come. 2501 Richmond is a project proposing a number of community benefits, such as the safe removal of the current closed school and associated hazards, repurposed open spaces with a variety of uses to promote gathering, playing, and relaxing, enhanced walking and cycling pathways, sidewalk improvements to the surrounding roads and intersections within the community, thoughtful streetscape design, and tree plantings. And lastly, a variety of housing options to allow for more diversity within the community and promote the ability to live and stay in your community when it's time to downsize. We are confident that the proposal will provide a diverse range of housing products at a location that is supported by transit and ideally located along one of the main southwest corridors of Crowchild Trail. While most of you are aware of its location, we'll quickly speak to it for the benefit of anyone attending that is not 100% clear on the application boundaries. It is located south of Richmond Road, southwest between 25th Street and Crowchild Trail, and is bounded by 30th Avenue to the south. The general characteristics of the property is that it slopes from south to north with a significant grade change, and the current school building and parking are located in the northeast corner of the property. Playfields are contained in the southwest corner and directly abut 30th Avenue and 25th Street. An existing pathway is contained along the Crowchild interface, and it is the desire of Minto to work with the land topography with their application proposal. There are a few trees along roadways that will be maintained or replanted depending on the demolition program. And the high school was in use for 30 years and closed in 1985. Since that time, the site has been underutilized from its original intent with a host of other educational operators and finally closing permanently a number of years ago. The following illustration is a conceptual plan showing the proposed building locations, access, green space allocations, and pathways. The plan is for 3 dedicated access points along the north, west, and south, which will bring traffic interior to the site to parkade accesses. All buildings will have underground parking, and the building form, to be shown a few slides from now, will range between 6 and 30 stories. Minto intends to provide a great street edges framed with housing and key areas for public access into the publicly accessible open spaces. All park spaces within the plan are inclusive to all residents in the community and will offer different programming for diversity of enjoyment. We have indicated a pathway alignment that meets the grade requirements for a 5-way pathway network, although our other pathways do exist that can take you from the southeast corner to the northeast corner to transit. The intention of the next couple slides is to show illustrations of key corners and elements around and within the plan, as available from the adjacent streets and roads. The first illustration is the corner of 25th Street and 30th Avenue, demonstrating tree-lined streets, building frontages, and landscape elements to draw you into the public spaces. Improvements will be made to road cross-sections, offering improved sidewalks, boulevards, and tree plantings. Another notable item is that the transition of building form from the street edge to the interior of the site will be notable along the edges. The second illustration shows an interior park, inclusive of seating, a potential playground, planting areas, walking paths, and seating. This third illustration is focused within the interior of the site, demonstrating similar characteristics of the previous images, but highlighting the ability for interior green areas for relaxing and reprieve from the surrounding streets and vehicular traffic. Finally, our last illustration is at the corner of 25th Street and Richmond Road, identifying a play space and gateway into the development at one of the key corners. It will include planting areas, green spaces for informal play, and seating areas, in addition to cross-section improvements on the boundary roads. Now let's take a closer look at the community green spaces, both surrounding the site, and on our next slide, we'll focus closer on the subject lands. The communities of Richmond, Nob Hill, and Killarney Glengarry contain a number of school sites and park spaces within very close proximity to 2501 Richmond. There are a number of these school sites with large outdoor field spaces, such as the Holy Name School, Killarney, Richmond, and large park spaces, including the Killarney Glengarry CA, Richmond CA, 26th Street Park, and the park spaces along 33rd Avenue. Each community park offering a variety of informal and formal play, including fields, playgrounds, playground equipment, and courts. The existing site contains a combination of building, hardscaping, also known as parking areas, sidewalks and pathways, and green space. We've completed a calculation of the uses and can conclude a total of 3.92 acres as fields and open space, 3.5 acres is hardscaping, including the parking, and 3.25 acres in building footprint in the northeast corner. I would now like to provide some information related to the publicly accessible open space that our proposal is offering. The total site area is approximately 11.49 acres. Should we decide to subdivide the site, then a total of 1.15 acres is owed in municipal reserves. Minto has worked thoughtfully with their landscape architects to provide open spaces that would equate to a similar or greater dedication, with specific amenities in mind to be mindful of the variety of residents and users in the community. The proposal is providing 3 publicly accessible private parks equating to 1.8 acres and an additional 3 acres of circulation non-building space, including the access roads, pathways, and seating areas. The full offering is over 45% of accessible area, amounting to 4.8 acres. This is in excess of the current open space offering on the existing site. With the surrounding community open spaces previously identified, the playfields and playgrounds, Minto feels confident they will be able to provide new and unique open spaces to the residents, for the residents to enjoy and utilize. Over the next 3 slides, I would like to speak a little closer to the types of open spaces we are proposing. The first space is at 25th Street and Richmond Road, our gather space. The gather space is a primary gateway to the new development and is intended to be a versatile space that supports year-round programming and activities that encourage community connection and gathering. As an open lawn with peripheral seating and planting, the space becomes a place to rest, gather, and recreate, and supports both programmed and unprogrammed activities like community picnics, markets, and frisbee in the warmer months, and ice skating in the winter. Our second park space is located in the southern portion of the plan, connected to 30th Avenue Southwest. This space offers a range of play opportunities that promote physical activity, creativity, and social interaction, which contribute to the community well-being and becomes an attractive destination for the broader community. This space is located above a parkade and will incorporate raised planting beds to balance an urban and naturalized aesthetic and define boundaries between public and private space. Programming may include a large, accessible, and customized playground with the potential for breakout spaces with lawn area that is accessible to the public. Our third play space, titled Refuge, is located central to the plan and surrounded by buildings. This space is centrally located and provides opportunity for refuge and respite amidst higher density development and taller built forms. This space can be a naturalized sanctuary with an enhanced tree canopy and sloping lawn. The lawn leads to a structure that provides versatile space for community events. It is intended to be a more intimate space than the main gathering gateway area near Richmond Road. Programming will include seating to support moments of rest and small group interactions, and enhanced landscaping to provide easy access to nature. The City of Calgary has numerous policy directions that we have taken into consideration in developing our approach to the site redevelopment. The City of Calgary Municipal Development Plan, also known as the MDP, is the strategic policy document that guides Calgary's growth and city building. Our plans have been developed around the MDP and its main policy directions that address climate, housing, land use, parks, and open spaces. In particular to note, the city's desire to realize comprehensive developments with higher densities and increased housing opportunities around the bus rapid transit system. Other policies that we're required to follow are the Westport Communities Local Area Plan, the Calgary Land Use Bylaw, and ones we need to consider are the Calgary Climate Strategy and the Housing Strategy, both approved this year. The subject site is currently zoned RC1. It was not uncommon years ago for school sites to be captured under park designations, community service designations, or residential designations. This particular site was built under a residential designation. It should also be noted that it is standard practice within the City of Calgary that high school sites are above and beyond the typical municipal reserve dedication required by the Municipal Government Act. And a purchase of those sites is a standard practice. So for example, in all new communities, high school sites are not typically provided as municipal reserve dedication, but as purchase sites. Our land use amendment is proposing to redesignate the site from its existing RC1 designation to a series of multi-residential designations. The land use district proposed for the site reflects appropriate transitions to the building scales shown in the local area plan, which I will show in later slides. The MH1 high-density low-rise district is being located on the majority of the westerly and southerly portions of the site with a maximum height of 26 meters or about 6 stories, which will vary to 4 stories in some locations based on site grading and building stepbacks. The central portion of the site is proposed for MH2, high-density medium-rise district, with a maximum height of 50 meters or about 15 stories. And the northerly and eastern portion of the site is proposed to be direct control based on the MH3, high-density, high-rise district, with a maximum height of 95 meters or about 30 stories, closest to the BRT station and along Crowchild Trail, to provide for better separation from this busy roadway for lesser density development. We are proposing a direct control district for 2 reasons. 1, to reduce the minimum density to 150 units per hectare, rather than the minimum 300 units per hectare as noted in that district, which will enable a variety of built forms. And 2, to reduce the minimum setbacks to accommodate flexible building placement on the site. Minto anticipates the development would accommodate about 2,500 units at full build out. We understand that there's some information that is currently being distributed around the community that we are requesting 5,000 units. All of our studies and technical analysis have been in the order of a maximum of 2,500 units. We aren't sure where the information was obtained, but we can confirm that we did not submit a request for 5,000 with the City of Calgary. To further demonstrate the land use proposal, we have created a 3D image that illustrates the proposed height transitions across the site. The topography lends itself to buildings that could range between 4 to 6 stories along the edges of our development and transitioning to 30 stories in the northeast corner adjacent to the Crowchild Trail and the BRT. Building heights may vary based on site grading and building stepbacks, and please note this is for illustration purposes only. The recently approved Westport Communities Local Area Plan identifies this site as a comprehensive planning site. As such, we are required to provide a master concept plan to support a land use application, which we have prepared in support of our application that was submitted. The local area plan has specific direction for the site, which we have also incorporated into our plans, and they include the following: locating taller buildings on the north end of the site to minimize shadowing, reduce building scale closer to 25th Street to provide transition to lower scale development, minimize driveway crossings and manage vehicle circulation on site, and accommodate the future location of the Max Yellow BRT station near our site. The local area plan also has a section on building scale that identifies a transition zone around the subject site of up to between 3 to 6 stories, 3 stories to the south, 4 stories to the west, and up to 6 stories to the north. We understand that this does not force redevelopment or specific heights and densities, but it offers an acceptable transition density for the future. Our site is strategically located within not 1, but 2 transit station areas along Crowchild Trail that is in easy walking distance, 26th Avenue and the Martel Loop Station. The majority of our site is within the core zone of the 26th Ave station, in which pedestrian activity and building scale is envisioned to be the highest. Transition zones surround the site in which building scales decrease and are lower than the core zone. These policy directions have been translated into our land use application and site design. Minto had Bunt and Associates prepare a transportation impact assessment based on the proposed 2,500 unit development, with the understanding that the transportation demand management, TDM measures, and infrastructure improvements will be required to support the broader Westbrook local area plan. The following are improvements that will be discussed with the city as part of our application. These improvements include new signals at 25th Street and 26th Avenue Southwest, new signals at 29th Street and Richmond Road Southwest, a new always stop at 25th Street and 26th Avenue Southwest, and upgrades to 25th Street Southwest from 26th to 30th Avenue. In addition to the improvements noted, we also see active mode improvements available. These are the upgrades that will benefit pedestrians and cyclists directly. Sidewalk frontage improvements, crosswalk improvements, curb extensions recommended at 25th Street and Richmond Road, and cycling improvements. So an upgraded pathway will be integrated through the site and tie into the network improvements on 26th Avenue Southwest. And lastly, we feel there are additional neighborhood improvements that could be explored with the city, including transit, shifting the southbound Crowchild Trail Southwest stop closer to the site and upgrading the BRT platform, and additional pedestrian connection across Crowchild Trail. This study will be reviewed by the city specialists, and they will be responding to our analysis in about a month and a half when we receive formal comments from the city. As part of the redevelopment of the site, Minto is proposing improvements to the road rights-of-ways that surround the site. I will demonstrate this over the next 3 slides. The 25th Street Road right-of-way will be improved to include a 3.5 meter multi-use pathway on the east side of the road. Landscaping within the road right-of-way will be limited as we near the Richmond Road intersection for pedestrian safety. The 30th Avenue Road right-of-way will be improved to provide a 3.7 meter tree-lined sidewalk on the north side of the roadway, and the Richmond Road right-of-way will be improved to a 4.5 meter tree-lined sidewalk on the south side of the roadway. And you can see this demonstrated here on the right-hand side of the slides. Vehicular access to the site has been limited to 3 locations, with private streets specifically designed to provide for comfortable pedestrian movement and vehicle access to a series of underground parking structures. You can see in our plan the roadways are identified in blue and the pedestrian network is shown in yellow dots. The road cross-section contains 2 3.5 meter pedestrian zones with a 6 meter drive lane and a parking lane. The interior roads are intended to be pedestrian friendly and focus less on the vehicle. I promise you are almost finished with the presentation and able to start answering some questions. I would now like to go over the timeline and next steps. In March of 2023, Minto Communities purchased the site and launched our project name 2501 Richmond. In the spring and summer, our team provided project updates to the Richmond Nob Hill community about our potential timing and when to expect a formal application submission. On November 15th, a land use application was formally submitted to the city, and we are expected to be in circulation immediately. And I understand they started us yesterday. As part of the land use application, we were required to submit formal studies for review by the city. These studies include transportation analysis and engineering analysis, and the city administration will review these studies and might ask for or request some additional analysis, and we will know that after they complete their first review. We have identified the upgrades that we expressed here tonight in those studies, and it'll be up to the city to review those and either concur or see if they have other suggested improvements that would be needed as part of this application. We feel very confident in our reports that this is an appropriate proposal. As you're aware, tonight is our first information session held online so that we can provide a presentation video to anyone unable to attend. And tomorrow night, we'll be holding an in-person session at the CA. We are looking forward to be responding to not only the city circulation feedback, but public feedback, and then finalizing our application over the next coming months. Our desired goal is to be in front of Calgary Planning Commission next summer and public hearing of council in the fall of next year. Minto has not decided at what stage they will undertake demolition of the school. They are not required to have an approved land use application to complete the demolition. However, they do require some level of comfort before the expense is undertaken. So there are a number of ways the community can be heard, and Martha alluded to some of that, from attending the information sessions, sharing your feedback through the online feedback form, contacting us on our project email address, visiting our website, providing your comments to your community association, and or providing direct feedback to the City of Calgary. So I'm going to pass things back over to Martha, who will guide the questions and answers session tonight. We will do our best to answer as many questions as we can. Some questions might end up coming in as comments to us for further investigation or further review, and we'll have to report back, but we'll do our best with our team available tonight to see what we can answer.
Thanks, Kathy. Before we open up to questions, I have a couple housekeeping items. I did forget to mention on the top that we had a few questions come in about the availability of this content. So tonight's presentation is posted to our website, 2501richmond.com, as well as the actual board panels that we are sharing at tomorrow's in-person session. So they're both listed on our project resource page. We've also added our supporting information document to the website. So there's quite a bit of content that got finalized and posted today. So we're if you're unable to attend, or if you know a neighbor who's unable to attend, the content's available, and this recording will also be available on the website. We have gotten some questions, so we'll get to those really quickly here. And we're going to also be posting a link to our online feedback form. It's the same feedback form that we're sharing tomorrow evening. And then we'll also have some written printed out versions for tomorrow's session as well. So just a reminder to continue to submit your questions in the chat. We are going to, as Kathy said, get to as many as we can this evening. And we're going to start right off the top. So Kathy, just going back even to the slide where we were discussing the unit count, we had a couple comments come in around how can we trust that the unit count will be 2,500, or when there is maybe some wiggle room within the proposed land uses. So if you don't mind discussing that.
That's a great question, and thank you for that. There is, I recognize that with land use districts, the city typically has a range within them, and there's mechanisms that the city has within those land use districts that we can restrict density, floor area ratios, heights, and a number of elements within that district, and that normally gets seen, in the name of the district. So you sometimes get, an F or an H or a D that follows the district. And so it can be managed that way. Another way to manage the number of units is through direct control districts. They put in parameters and could put a solid number in place. But is a great question. And that's why I wanted to allude to what our technical studies are showing. Technical studies are, and I'm sure we have seen questions related to technical studies that we've received thus far. And thank you for those prior questions. They need to be identified with a number. You have to analyze something. And so the city will, if the city grants approval, if this gets approved, and 2,500 units is what was established in all of those technical studies, that is the maximum. The city will, to go beyond that, would have to look at a host of other, a new technical study that would demonstrate that it was feasible. So there are a number of mechanisms that can be used to create that maximum number that can be, explored or implored through this process. And we certainly are open to finding whatever's the right mechanism that would give that limit, because that's our projected number.
Yeah. Thanks. Moving on to parking, we had quite a few questions come in around parking. So what we're going to be doing as best as we can to all the attendees is we won't necessarily repeat questions if they're the same, but we're really trying to get to all the questions. So topic of parking as grouped. Will there be a parking space provided for each unit?
This is a very good question. Our goal is to provide, no, we're not requesting zero parking. We are going to look at market rates, and market rates are typically, that one per unit that gets established, but that will be part of our process. We are intending to have parkades under each of the buildings. So each building will have parking available to each site. And at this point in time, we haven't established a full ratio, but we will be looking at that as we go forward. Yeah. And that will include visitor parking. Sorry, I'll add that as well.
Yeah,
there will be a visitor parking requirement. Sometimes we can provide those on site, and sometimes they're provided within the parkades as well. But they will be contained within the site.
Thanks. Okay, next question. It's a hybrid parking transportation kind of question. Someone was actually asking a lot of conversation then about on-street parking and the impacts that might happen to on-street parking. Would there be the possibility of changing roads to one-way streets to control the direction and volume of traffic around the site?
Around the public streets, the like
Yep,
25th Street
yeah.
and that one. I guess that's certainly something to consider. The city will be reviewing that. We can add that comment in to propose that to the city as feedback we've received. If there is traffic movements that would be more effective and more efficient or have a higher level of service, if they were to be one-way roads. So it's something we could definitely make a comment on and have a discussion with the city. I don't know that that's something that we reviewed. As part of this, we were looking at all, kind of the dispersion of traffic that comes out from these roads to the surrounding network. But it's something we can certainly note and have a conversation about.
Okay. And continuing on sort of the on-street impact or the on public street impacts of parking. For residents, if there is an insufficient amount of parking provided for residents and visitors, what will be the impacts to the immediate neighbors on the side streets, and what I guess are the mechanisms to control the parking surrounding?
Sure. And it's my understanding that sometimes multifamily projects don't get parking permits. I'm not 100% sure. I do think there are some parking permit areas within the neighborhood. I could be wrong. That's one mechanism, is that parking is restricted, or there is parking hours that can be added to the street. We certainly are open to discussing that more with the city and the residents, understanding that that the goal is not to underpark the site to have it spill out onto the public roads. So we're happy to have continued discussion about that.
Okay, moving on to transportation, and maybe if you wanted to jump, actually, no, you're on it, to a slide that shows some of the site access. We had just a question for clarification. Where is the access road going? So I think they mean access to the site.
Yeah, for sure. You can see there's 3 points. I noted in the presentation that there was a north access. So there's one, hopefully you can see my little hand moving. There's one access to the north that will come in, and this will then access the various parkades. So it'll be a loop. So we don't have a road that goes completely through the site. We have it coming into the site and accessing those parkades. We have one off the west that I've got my hand on right now, and that will come in and do the same kind of thing. It's got a loop. And then we have one off the south, off 30th, that will go into the buildings on the south side. Our desire was to try and balance the impact of having access points and kind of sharing them around the site. And so we've done that, also trying to minimize the effect of pedestrians walking on 25th Street or Richmond Road and not having to cross a bunch of driveways and individual access points. And so it was thoughtfully placed in those 3 locations.
And while we're on the slide, we just got a question in about why is Richmond Road shortened at the Crowchild end, or the northeast end?
Right here.
Yes.
My understanding is it's to look at a relocated transit area. And so this would become a plaza space at the end, and be more of a public space to be able to have a better transit option.
Thank you. Okay, can we go to the transportation improvement, the proposed changes? We have a couple questions, and this might draw some controversy actually, because traffic circles are not always welcome, but the stoplights at 29th Street, a comment we have just to share with the group. There's a question as to why it isn't actually a traffic circle incorporated at 29th Street, Richmond, and that other intersections.
Sure, I might have to ask Emmet to answer that question.
Yeah.
Sure, can I answer that? So that's something that the city will be looking at. So when we do a recommendation for either a signal, it's a signal or a roundabout that the city will look at. The difficulty with roundabouts or traffic circles is they require significantly more land to accommodate them. So then that's difficult in urban locations where you have old right-of-ways that you may not be able to fit a traffic circle. That's something that's going to be reviewed through the application.
Thanks, Amrit. And maybe don't go way too fast. While we're chatting, question just came in also. Will there be any traffic calming measures on Richmond Road, along Richmond Road?
Sure, I can answer that. Again, that's going to be something that the city will be looking at. So the traffic calming here would be looking at things like curb extensions to improve pedestrian visibility. We and other ways of reducing vehicle speeds. So that's something that will certainly be looked at through. We've recommended it in certain locations, and the city may, through their application review, may identify additional locations that they'll want that traffic calming on Richmond Road.
Yeah, thanks. So more traffic transportation related questions. We'll just continue on because there's quite a few. This has probably also been some of the most common content we've been getting over email as well. So appreciate the content coming through on tonight's session. So ideally, there from a participant here, that we would have the ability to create an entrance and an exit from Crowchild only, and with some integration into 33rd Street overpass. I wonder if they mean 33rd Ave, to manage all the traffic and prevent severe impacts to existing streets. Any comments on that? The ability to even access Crowchild Trail from the site?
So the connection to 33rd directly from the site would not be feasible, but say a right in, right out exit Crowchild Trail. That's something again that we would review with the city. We've submitted an application in the worst case, which does not have that access in there, and the city, as part of the review, may identify that it's required, and there's other factors that go into the appropriateness of that, including that BRT station and the conflicts that may arise, and then adding a new connection that also results in shortcutting traffic through the community. So that's something that we have to balance and review through the application.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. So again, this is a common sentiment, just to echo some of the comments that are coming through right now, just to reiterate. Someone wrote, I think my main concern is about traffic. And again, we're hearing that's pretty consistent with what we're hearing. So thanks for that comment. But then they went on to explain they're happy to see that there are lights at 29th Street and Richmond Road for pedestrian safety. But a question, back to the direct access to Crowchild Trail. So just a comment that we're hearing a lot of comments on that. So thank you for those comments, and it will come through as we summarize the engagement outcomes. Okay, a question on Richmond Road. It's currently unable to handle the traffic load from the recent developments that have been happening across the street, and how will a light and a four-way stop help the traffic and the disruption and noise?
Sure, I can answer that. So in terms of what Richmond Road is classified as by the city, is it's a collector. So it's one level above a local residential street, which is the most roadways in front of single family dwellings. So it's a collector in terms of it has a higher vehicle capacity. In terms of what it used to operate as, so going back to when the Viscount Bennett School was actually in operation, Richmond Road had a considerable higher traffic volume load than it does have right now. So what we've seen is a drop in the last 30 years in traffic, and once you add this development in, we're resulting in the volumes on Richmond Road nearing in similar volumes of what was experienced about 30 years ago, 40 years ago. So in terms of the capacity of the roadway, we're still within what the city has identified as a guideline for a collector road. But we do acknowledge it's going to be an increase from what's currently happening, but it's not significantly different from what was historically happening on that roadway.
Okay. We had a clarifying question come in from a couple questions ago. Can you reconfirm that access to 33rd is not an option, and why? 33rd Ave. So yeah, we did clarify that.
Oh, so sorry, direct access from 25th Street Southwest?
I think they mean direct access even. I wonder if they do mean from 25th Street. Actually, I'll message them to see if we can clarify, but let's just wait a minute, see if they. Okay, I'll wait. I'll message them back and we'll clarify. Will any traffic studies be done based on the current traffic flow and the potential impact with the extra 2,500 vehicles? Did you want to discuss a bit about the TIA and that process?
Sure. So what we've submitted right now is a version 1 report, which accounts for current traffic flows, the 2,500 units proposed, as well as other developments that have been proposed in the area. And then through the application process, the city will have comments. They may want us to look at as a different, including additional developments we may have not included in the study, looking at different scenarios. So what we've submitted is a version 1 report That includes current traffic flows, some other developments in the area, and the 2,500 units. And there will be additional revisions as we go through the application process.
Thanks. Okay, a couple. Really, we're coming in a lot of transportation questions. So Amber, you're going to be on the hook here for a little while. So yeah, clarifying, yes. I know there are concerns about possibility of opening 25th Street up all the way to 33rd. I think the question is maybe a couple different angles from attendees. Is that a possibility? Has it been looked at? Will it be looked at? I think.
I could say at this point, we haven't reviewed it or analyzed a scenario where we're connecting directly from 25th Street to 33rd Ave. But the city may, as part of the review of our version 1 report, identify that they want us to look at that. So if they identify us that they want that reviewed, we would. But at this point, we have not proposed it and assessed it.
Okay, thanks. And just to clarify on the Richmond Road as a collector, we had someone wanting to clarify that they don't believe that east of 26th Street along Richmond Road is a collector. Is that accurate? Or I think they're just asking for clarification.
Yeah, I'll clarify that. Yeah, so in terms of the way it's built, the roadway is actually built, it is built to a collector standard, both east and west. And I know there was a comment about volume. So a collector is there's a certain threshold of daily traffic that a roadway can carry. So a collector is up to 8,000 vehicles per day. So this development would increase certain sections of that to about 6,900. But still within that 8,000 threshold.
Okay, thanks. All right, just getting through. Okay, yeah, we covered the different access points. I'm just going through. This slide, let's stay on this because this slide shows a pedestrian overpass over Crowchild. Would you like to explain, can we explain that a little bit more?
Sure. So what in terms of our technical study, we've identified the absolute requirements to accommodate development, but we've also identified opportunities to support the development through supporting alternative travel modes, so including the transit stop, moving that BRT stop closer to the site to provide more direct connectivity, and as well as looking at potentially an overpass of a new overpass over Crowchild Trail for pedestrians, and that location may vary. We've just identified it on 29th Avenue right now, but that's just a potential location that we may have a new connection across Crowchild to support pedestrians or residents living in this development as well as in the neighborhood in general.
Okay, thank you. Continuing on track, there's a lot coming in on traffic. We'll give you one more and then we'll give you a break for a bit. How many vehicles per unit were assumed in the traffic study?
So there's a different list. I guess we're talking about parking versus traffic. So in terms of what we've assumed that this development is generating, we're using standard traffic generation rates for suburban or general urban multifamily. So we have not applied. Our main analysis is based off typical multifamily developments. We also did sensitivity analysis with reductions or associated with BRT, but that is not what all these requirements are based off. They're based off typical multifamily traffic generation.
Thanks. We'll come back to traffic, but just to jump down, we're going to change topic for a moment. We're going to discuss some open space questions that have come in. Kathy, please explain the concept municipal reserves owing.
So as part of all, well, it goes back many years. The Municipal Government Act requires that development provides 10% of their land in municipal reserves. So I'll relate it to, say, a new development. Say you've got a new community. The MGA requires that 10% of your total gross developable area. So if you have environmental reserves, say you've got a wetland or you've got a creek or a ravine or an area that qualifies as a natural area, that comes off your total area. And then there's a requirement that 10% of that of the remaining becomes municipal reserve. And what the city does is they It goes through the process where they decide, is it a school site? And when I say, is it a school site, it's typically elementary and K-9 schools. Is it a park space? Is it a linear park? Are there pathways that are needed? Are there pathways along natural areas? And so they will come to a conclusion on how they would like the municipal reserve spent. And I commented in the application that when we have high schools, rec centers, I think those are the only two. Those are not part of that 10% reserve dedication. Those are dedication that's typically a purchase. The city purchases those. They have a cash in lieu fund, and they use that to purchase those bigger community amenities. And so this site, given its size, the city has determined that yes, if this site was subdivided, 1.5 acres would be required in municipal reserves. And so what we're demonstrating here, and that could come in one park space, it could come in a combination of park spaces. So what we're proposing, at this point, we're not proposing a subdivision, we're proposing a land use application. We are providing park spaces that are publicly accessible. So they will have the appropriate easements on them that say they are open parks to the public, to the community. They're not private parks, but they will be provided as park space. And so that was important for us to through our process to be able to identify that. So it's so when it's owing, it means the city would expect to see park space in the amount of a minimum. It's that 1.15 acres that's required. Hopefully that answers the question in a long about
Yeah.
kind of.
No, thank you. And also on that same sort of topic, so what is a privately available public park? What does that mean?
So if you take a look at this park space here, so this would be it'd be treated as if it was a pocket park. So if you had a good example, it'd be very similar to, since it's on the edge, it makes it similar to your other park, your 26th Ave park that you've got, or 26th Street Park that's over on the other side. So this is open to anyone. Anyone can come and sit, anyone can use it. Same if we have a play structure in our play park down at the bottom, this 0.8 acres would be, you can't fence it off, we can't close it off, it's not private. It's an area that you would have accessible and look like a park. Yeah, and act like a park. But it would be maintained by this development and not by the city. The city of Calgary maintains reserve parks.
Thank you. So we have a comment coming in, and we've heard about this a lot in this community. But sorry, I just lost my space here. So some of the, if you can go back to the slide of the existing park space in the community, I think it's one up. Maybe it's down.
This one, the existing,
No,
park
in the whole
space,
community.
this one
Yeah,
here.
thank you.
Yeah.
Someone just
Yeah.
wanted to make a note, and I'm sure as everyone's probably quite aware in this community that some of the green space along 33rd is slated for redevelopment. So just a flag there that they wanted us to be aware of. So that there is some loss of green space the community is already experiencing.
Yeah, and that's a fair comment. Typically golf courses and other amenities like that are also above the municipal reserve dedication. So when I talked about things that are above, and we've seen that throughout the city, you've seen some other golf courses have been redeveloped in the city, and we've certainly heard about that over the last 10 years. So it's noted. It's noted that yes, it is visible as a green space. I do recognize as well, there's some spaces that act more, as a boulevard green space within the area. So there's a collection of both program spaces as well as other areas that come, go along some of our roadways and contain pathways. And so there is a combination, but I recognize that comment. There is, the golf course certainly is something that has been present for a long time within this community.
Okay. So and also continuing on, just there's some more comments as well about some of the green space that is proposed. Some comments about the fact that intimate parks can sometimes mean small, and there's concern that some of the spaces might be unusable. Again, I know we did some articulation through the drawings, but any thoughts on that comment?
And that's a valid comment as well. I think we have started to demonstrate how this is, and I said illustration purposes only. You heard me say that throughout during the presentation. the goal is to start to try and look at the spaces and look at the massing and to see how it all comes together. We have started to envision those spaces. Do we have to go in and do a little bit more detail and really see if it does have that feel and appeal that Minto is looking for in some of those parks? They could vary, they could change. We certainly have to start with a proposal and put that in front. And I think that's a notable comment that we'll probably go back and talk about those, talk about that element with our team. Just to, and sometimes we get into, you saw some illustrations, we get into a little bit more testing of parks, and a good way is for us to almost go and visibly see something the same size, but it's a great comment. We certainly have more work to do on more of the details, but appreciate the comment.
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, it's another similar comment around just, the ability to see what kind of practical uses and amenities we provide in those spaces. So yeah, thanks for that, Kathy. We are getting comments too. So just want everyone to know we have heard a lot of comments about the toboggan hill in the corner. So thanks for those comments. Certainly it comes across as a well-used space across the community. We've had another one. This comes up a lot every session. What about pets and any kind of discussion on, oh, there goes my lights from my office. Any kind of a conversation on dog park or pet spaces?
Yeah, we haven't to date, but I saw the comments come in, and it's certainly an amenity we could look at. We've seen some fantastic parks. There's a fabulous one that's been built in Curry that can house some of the smaller pets. So it's something we haven't talked about as a team, but I think we'll take it back and talk about these other amenities. I think it's important to hear that from the community as well. What are some things you're missing? I know, my kids went to Killarney School. I know the extensive amount of play fields and, some of the quaint parks that have come up. We'd love to hear about some things that you think are missing, or some uses that we could consider. And I think dog park was a great example of what we heard in some of the comments before the session, and something that we'll consider and see if that's something that would be valuable to the community.
I know, and just as we say that, we are getting comments about how people don't want off-leash areas. There's such a controversial use. So we hear all the comments about dog space.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to Kathy, some zoning and some process related questions. I think this might actually be a general question about the land use bylaw, but we had one come in. Has the city changed the zoning laws? And maybe clarify if I've misunderstood that question. I think it's about.
And is that related? I guess my question is that related to the current conversations about looking at some of the low density districts? Nothing. Okay. The land use bylaw has been in effect since 2009. I think it came in right before the MDP, and it is under review. So right now, the city of Calgary has contracted out a relook at the municipal development plan and the Calgary land use bylaw. And so some districts certainly have changed over time. There's been some additions, some tweaks, some minor things that have occurred with the districts. But we have not seen an overhaul of the land use bylaw for 13 years, but it will be coming. There is some decisions that were made in September at the housing the housing strategy as it was brought to committee and council, and looking at doing some land use changes. They were supposed to be done in about 6 months. So we're probably a couple months in from that. So probably 4 months out if they're going to make any changes to the existing districts, but nothing has been changed in the last few months.
Okay, thanks. A couple questions about the sort of built form that have just come in. The first question is generally just, we had this come in a few different ways. Is Minto considering rentals at this site? Is there any consideration for seniors housing? This has come in a few different ways. I think people are interested to know what might be filling the site. Sure. But also from a lens of a question about, I think how will this type of building contribute to housing affordability? So we've gotten it two different ways.
Two different ways. I might put that question to Minto, and I don't know if it's Alex or Nora or who would like to speak to it. But maybe you could give kind of, some of the things you've been exploring. I know this is early in the land use application, but did one of you want to answer that as to what Minto is interested in?
Yes, and of course I'm having technical difficulties here. Just give me a sec. There we go. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for the active participation. And we've heard tons of comments from everyone. And that was a big goal of our session today, was to be able to hear from everybody. So thank you for the comments. We, as Kathy mentioned, are still in the initial kind of planning stages. So we're doing overall kind of land use, and our initial application was just last week. And we're taking the feedback, and then we're going to get into more detailed housing design. Our goal right now is to appeal to a wide range of people. So we're looking at everything from owners to renters, and then all kinds of demographics within that. So young families, young couples, potentially some seniors and some students. So we want to appeal to that wide range of demographics that we think is currently maybe missing from the neighborhood.
Thanks, Nora. And a clarifying question, because and this terminology is tricky, actually, like the affordable versus market-based. Are you looking at any affordable housing, below market housing for the site?
It's a really tricky question, and everybody has a kind of different definition of affordable. And just like we're looking at all housing forms, we're looking at different options. We know that affordability is something that's a real challenge in the city right now. So we're going to work with all the stakeholders, whether that be city people, council, community members, and see what's most needed there so that we can deliver on those needs.
Thanks. And Kathy, did you want to respond to what these kinds of developments, how they impact affordability on a citywide level?
I appreciate that, because we did get a couple questions around that earlier today. Our city needs housing, and it needs housing in as many forms as it can get. All of it plays a part. It's all within the spectrum. So costs, if we have a tight supply of houses, and then costs go up. Costs go up as we develop new houses, and there's limited supply and a high demand. And so I know a question had come up of it, will it hit, an affordable level for those that are needing housing, and obviously had watched some of the conversations that occurred in September. Well, there might be an opportunity where someone can afford, a more expensive unit and then free up another unit. So it's a full spectrum that we see with housing. And it all comes down to supply, and we're challenged. Construction costs have gone up, inflation has gone up. We constantly have conversations with the city about, every cost that we have. We're trying to be, climate conscious, and trying to think of ways that we can, be as positive we can in our developments that aren't a negative impact on the climate. And sometimes that costs money. And so it's certainly a challenge, but ultimately supply is the best mechanism to get across the city in order to reduce costs. And so that will then free up some opportunities across the city. So to Nora's point, just looking at different opportunities will be what we're exploring. And certainly at this point in time, we want to be open to that and see where we can be a partner and play a role. Understanding it's important, though. It has to be quality development, the public ground level. That public realm is very important as well. It's not about, all about units and whatnot. It's about creating, community here, and creating a diversity and opportunity for those, especially if you're wanting to stay in the community and you need to downsize, or it's just you want to stay nearby.
Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Nora. A couple questions now. We'll move to try and group some built form questions. Sure. We have some questions about site grading. It's come in a few different ways, and we have this as well through the email. I guess the question, I think, essentially is, because there is quite a bit of elevation change at the site, people are wondering, when you're saying 3 or 4 stories, is there the possibility that the grading might be used to the advantage, where the impact of the housing heights might not be so imposing on existing homes?
Yeah, and that's certainly it. As we start to drop through the middle of the site, and this is bad, this is showing it flat, which does not demonstrate what I'm going to try and explain to you. When we drop, the city calculates their heights from the lowest grade. And so when we come down a slope and we can do slope adaptive, that means the top part might be a couple stories, and the bottom, by the time you do the story count, it could be much deeper, because we have to take it from the deepest of the grades. So that's where we think there's great opportunity, especially as we go through the site, and the site, drops towards the north, is we're going to work with the topography so that we can have kind of those mixed elevations. So I was very non-committal, going, it could be 4 stories, it could be 6 stories. It could be a combination, but we definitely want to work with the grade. And then the interface along the streets, that's the most important interface, and I'm going to identify it here, is certainly the street and the avenue, especially as it's across the street from, you know, some are side homes and some are directly across, is that being a scale that has a comfortable feel. It's important when you walk up a sidewalk that you have, you know, it's those first couple stories of a building that you feel and you feel safe around, or you feel the impact of the density. And so it's our goal to make sure that, you know, these edges that are going to be heavily traveled by pedestrians have the comfort of trees, wide sidewalks, and a building form that actually feels good. So I'm answering that in a big convoluted way, but we definitely want to work with the topography in order to try and adjust some of the heights across and take advantage of those interfaces that will be of benefit to the neighbors.
Fair. I'll note to everyone again, just a reminder that we are recording the session. So we realize we're at about the hour mark. So if for any reason you have to drop off, just know that we are recording the session. So you'd be able to check it out, the balance of the content on our website by the end of this week. And we're getting a lot of really great questions. I think probably second to discussion around traffic or connected to that, we're getting a lot of comments overall about the 30 stories. Can we just clarify? We had one also clarifying question. Someone may have misheard in 36 stories, but I believe so just to clarify the heights that we're proposing at the moment, or that's being shown, and clarify the maximum height.
Sure, and I'm just going to go back. It was 30 stories was that elevation, and I want to say I'm just going back. I think it's 95 meters. I am almost there. My apologies. Yes, 95 meters is equivalent to about 30 stories, and so typically the stories are about 3 meters, and you know, so it does have some. The story level might end up being adjusted, but it's 95 meters that we're proposing. And right now, this is where we're proposing it. It's in that top northeast corner. In the farthest space, we have, I'm not sure if we provided shadow studies. Vern can answer that. Vern submitted the application. If we haven't, it's something that we typically do as well, that we will be providing.
And then again, I think we have heard from a lot of people. I think 30 stories was quite alert, was a very shocking number. But for the sort of community, I guess the question has come in a couple ways over the course of the session. Like, has there been any consideration to R1, continuing R1 through the site, or townhomes, or sticking with a more like a 4 to 6 story range across the site?
No, it's a great question. I think Minto values being a partner with the city, and the city has they would like to see densification, especially in comprehensive sites that offer that opportunity, that are near transit. It's not unheard of for us to see examples in the city. We certainly have some that are adjacent to LRTs. That's a common form that we see. There's an example of something similar in Inglewood. There is a tower that was approved on the BRT line that sits against Blackfoot Trail, right against single family homes. Also seen as an area, a pocket that would be available for density and be able to support that transit. It was approved at 230 units per acre. This one is 200 units per acre, so it's comparable. And so when Minto looked at the site, and I appreciate the comments about the scale that has been identified, they saw it as and committed to some of the developments they've done as a real opportunity to, again, go back to what does the site, what kind of supply and what kind of density can we bring to the city? The city has big goals in their MDP of trying to densify. 50% of the development should be going into the established areas, as well as 50% into the new communities. We certainly don't see those large of numbers in the inner city or comprehensive sites available that are on an edge. I think we see that as an opportunity. I know there's comments about it with the transit network not feeling so edge-like, but it was certainly in their values to try and see if they could bring something of density and units to the city.
Yeah. I know. So sticking on shadow studies, do we know what the timeline is for the shadow studies? Because they haven't been prepared yet, but what's the timeline?
Yeah, Vern, did we supply shadow studies with our application, or it's something we can certainly do in a short amount of time, but I'm just curious if we actually submitted that with our application.
I'm going to unmute Vern and ask to start his video.
Yes, Yeah, shadow studies have not been submitted to the city at this point in time, but the intent is to prepare shadow studies,
Okay.
you know, as we move through the application.
No, thank you for that. And that's something we can prepare. When we've got massing models, it's quite easy to look at that and look at the various times of the year and the impact it would have.
And I'm just trying to get some more of the built form kind of and questions going. You know, you did touch on it briefly, Kathy, but we have received a question about what are other precedents within the city of Calgary of a similar level of intensity being proposed within an existing sort of a single family neighborhood? Do we?
Yeah.
We've been asked that question as well over email. That's why I want to bring it up again.
Yeah. And that was the one recent example we have is in Inglewood. It's approved on it's on the east side of Inglewood on Blackfoot. I'm trying to think the crossroad. Vern might remember the crossroad. So that's there. We've also we've had some examples of it was down in, is it Woodbine, Vern? Maybe I'll get you to answer this. There was another example of adding density along a corridor adjacent to single family homes. Certainly Westbrook does have the LRT adjacent to transit, that one as well as achieving the same kind of densities. Can you think of any other examples, Vern?
Yeah, I mean, in Spruce Cliff, of course, there's you know, the Brava, the Ovation, you know, taller towers that have been introduced there, as well as, I mean, you've mentioned, of course, down in Inglewood, I think the cross street, I think it's 19th Street, is the cross street on that one, and but generally, what we're finding is that near transit, near BRT and LRT, there definitely is the desire to increase height and density. And so that's where we're finding that a lot of you know, the city's impetus as far as providing, you know, variety of housing options is moving in those locations with higher heights and higher densities.
Where St. Brentwood's another example where we see things.
Brentwood.
We've also 17th Avenue, adjacent to many lower density communities, Cliff Bungalow, Mission. There's quite a few that have been approved in higher density form. They're on a BRT route as well. So the city sees the opportunity to be able to densify, and that's where the local area plan identified it, as well as the MDP in some of their areas that they'd like to see densification. So
Yes.
a number of examples, Martha.
A number, even Acadia.
If we can think of more when we answer the questions formally as part of the package, we'll add some other examples as well. But those are the ones that come to mind.
And we have had a few comments come in around this not being the last available piece of land to develop in the city. This isn't the only piece of the housing puzzle across the city. Kathy, if you wanted to maybe add some just some additional additional thoughts to that comment, because it has come in a few different ways, that sort of a why here or why this site.
No, and it's definitely it's a great comment. We've seen some areas. You think about the west side. You know, when the west side was annexed, you know, in the late 90s, it came in with a whole collection of really low density residential. There were some pockets that are, you know, 1 to 3 units per acre, 3 to 5. And we see the West District developing at large intensities. So it isn't the last pocket. There's not a lot of large pockets. You know, we've seen some smaller redevelopment pockets. You've seen that in Marta Loop, where it's, you know, you've got a collection of that run along 33rd there. The last, I'd say, larger pocket I've seen, there's the one on Bow Trail by the Shag station. There was, you know, that comprehensive development that's been approved. So there's not a lot. I'd say there's not a lot to this scale, but it's definitely not the last one. I'm not gonna. I would agree with that comment that there's still opportunities throughout the city, but not a lot of them. But yeah, in the inner city areas.
Oh, thanks. There's been a couple of questions, and Minto, just Nora, Alex, if you have a chance to unmute. So we've had a few questions about, is there any possibility that this site would then sell to another developer, or rather, what's the guarantee that if this were to be approved, that it will be Minto as the developer?
It is our intention to not sell this site. We are primary developer and the primary builder on it currently, and we don't have plans to change that.
Thank you for that. It has come in because appreciate that response. Yeah, I'm gonna keep looking for it. We do have quite a few questions that have come in. About, I'm just trying to find the question around what, there was a question around the comprehensively planned site as identified in the LAP. We have a lot of questions coming in, so I'm just going to sort through them right now.
Yeah, and do you want us to speak to this? Do you want Byrne to speak to this, the comprehensive planning site?
Yeah,
a little bit more.
yeah, Byrne, give a bit of an overview of the comprehensive
Well,
planning
I
site.
found the question if you want me to read it.
Sure, thanks, Megan.
Yeah, Westbrook LAP designated this site as comprehensive planning. Please describe what you've done to meet this requirement. Yeah, Westbrook LAP designated the subject site as comprehensive planning. So yeah, how is this being done?
Sure. And, definitely, we recognize that this site is a comprehensive planning site. And to that end, there's a number of information pieces that we have to provide at the application stage. And so what we've done is we've provided that information, and most of it's in our supporting information document that I believe is going to be posted or has been posted on our website. And some of the elements of that information that's provided for comprehensive planning sites is, showing transition of use and scale to adjacent uses, hierarchy of streets and pedestrian routes, identifying phasing of future development, the use of the site design to activate edge conditions, location of publicly accessible open space. Those sorts of things are all included in our supporting information document that we've submitted with the application that you can take a look at online.
Thanks, Byrne. We have a question about the internal roadways and how they're shown on the amenity board. Just to go to that board for a minute. So someone just wanted to mention so that the internal roadways in this board are shaded a green color, the same green color as park space. Did you want to just give a bit of a description on that?
Yeah. And I appreciate that. And I think I noted that in the presentation that the extra circulation space does include those access points. What we have, I illustrated that, I think it was in the roadway one when I talked about it's more pedestrian friendly than vehicular focused. We've got wider sidewalks down those roads. So it acts as more of a connection point. And there is, a small area that's road. It is overlapping. I'm not gonna try to convince you that it's not dual purposed and it's all circulation and open space. It does overlap, so it would overlap here at the top, as well as right here off the west. I think what we're wanting to demonstrate is certainly the difference between a massed site, so a building, and what is open space on the site. But thank you for that comment.
Yeah, staying on this board, the green space as proposed is segmented and compartmentalized rather than continuous. This will limit the usability of some of the green spaces. Is there openness to kind of merging some of the spaces in the open space on this site plan?
I think there is. I think that's, and I'm going to go to the one map that we had that showed was part of the transportation or the road network. I think there is an opportunity for that. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit just to be able to show. So we've got areas like this that are combined spaces. If we have some discussions about, just programming extend a little bit further, we are indicating, that pathway that meets the grades. It's very tricky when you've got pathways, and you all know that the pathway along Crowchild, it's not the nicest of pathways. That it does have a little bit of grade to it. We have to be able to get you, the accessibility requires us to get you, from point A to point B with the right grades. And so there's definitely other opportunities for pathways, but I think if the expansion of some of those park spaces, it's not, it's something we could consider if there was a desire to have that be a little bit bigger. I know there's some complexities on how you get into parkades and parkade access, but I think we're open to that to see if it's valuable to combine some of that circulation space into some of those park spaces, but we can take that away.
And then for the urban design enthusiast, a question just came in as you were describing this. Has the internal circulation had been considered to be a Woonerf style or just pedestrian prioritized style area?
Yeah, it's a very good question. The Woonerf one, I mean, I think our access roads are going to kind of act similar to that. We try to, from an accessibility standpoint, Woonerfs have been kind of a challenge for us, and Woonerfs and
Also to say,
you can pronounce it. Yeah. It's a challenge because sometimes you don't have the correct separation for accessibility. Say if you need edges to be able to like say if you're hindered in your vision or you're trying to maneuver a wheelchair. So it's something where we've tried to create some of these kind of combined spaces that will act similar and try and represent the pedestrian first versus the vehicle first. And I think you'll see that kind of prevalent in here as kind of those shared spaces, but to a certain degree that we're still trying to make sure that we're not having issues getting into the parkades and getting folks through the site.
Thanks, Kathy. A couple points of information that came in as we were discussing park space. If you want to go back to the existing community park, the broad view, they just wanted, we had a couple clarifications. So thank you for this, that it's not the golf course in the Richmond Green area. It's an open green space in the 2 baseball diamonds.
Yes. Yeah.
And also that it's not just the golf course, there's an area along 29th Street as well. So just some clarification for that point. So thank you for that point of clarification.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, a bit of a question that we have not had this one come in, so I'll pause here for a minute. Is there any sort of percentage of the development or that goes to public art? Is there going to be any kind of public art component to this site?
That's a great question. I'm going to throw that to Nora. Nora, if you haven't thought about it, I'm sure you probably will if there's an opportunity for that. So I'll let Nora respond.
For sure. We don't have any details or plans in place, but it's something that's certainly important to us. And we'd love to hear feedback from people on what kind of art, what kinds of features they want. And so it's definitely something that we're going to pursue.
Thanks, Nora. Just sort of tidying up, getting through some of the questions, or making sure I'm getting to all of them. Interesting point. Yeah, so another comment actually, that there is a master plan community 30 seconds down Crowchild, proposed with 300 acres and 5,000 units from, and I think they're referring to Curry. So just a point that there is sort of things happening in the area as well.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just moving on to sort of, again, back to a little bit process, just sort of process and has Minto requested a limit, or has there been a discussion around what's the upper limit of the site? Has that been part of the discussion?
It goes back to the comment I made earlier about the 2,500 being the number that we put into our technical studies as our upper limit. So that is the limit that we're not asking for anything above that. We are going through all the technical analysis with 2,500 units. And so technically that's the number that we've submitted and want reviewed. So we're not interested in, maxing out, like we talked about, districts, land use districts. That is the number that we have, that we are having technically reviewed.
Thank you. Some questions to land uses. Has there been any consideration for commercial as part of this site?
That's a great question. And I'm just going to go back to the concept plan. This is, and you'll probably agree, it's definitely given the location of the site. I know there's some commercial that sits to the north. The MX district does allow for some commercial. It's more supporting to it. It's not, it's not a full commercial district. So there is that opportunity. We would want to do some investigations and a market review just to see the viability of commercial and maybe what's missing. But right now it does exist within the MH district. So it is an opportunity, not a must do, but it is an opportunity. And that's something that Minto will look into. They haven't executed a formal market review at this point, but we definitely had heard that question also got asked to us by the city in some of our early discussions. So it's something that it's not on the table, off the table, but something that we'll consider for sure.
Great. And then just to clarify, can you clarify that it's 2,500 units? Do you mean across the whole site or just within the 30-story building?
Across the entire site. So everything that you see that's being shown in this proposal, that's the maximum number with all those buildings, with this collection of buildings.
Fantastic. Okay. Has there been, okay, so on to servicing, has there been a study to understand the current electrical, traffic, sewer, or water impacts, given the structure?
No, for sure. And thanks for that. We do have engineers on our team. We don't have the engineers here tonight, but we do have engineers on our team, and they have reviewed the servicing, and they will continue as the city reviews the application. They likely, it's very common that the city will come back and say, can you do some analysis on this system? Can you check that system? So we certainly anticipate there might be some further analysis, but we do have engineers that have been looking at servicing in the area. The nice thing is I know we talked about Curry. This area has definitely, had an investigation of a certain level of servicing, with them being our close neighbors. And so the city definitely understands the area and some of the downstream infrastructure. So it will be fully evaluated and vetted through this process, but we have submitted some initial findings on servicing.
Because we have heard quite a few comments coming in just generally about and what is
and support it. Yeah.
If I didn't catch it, did you describe a bit of the process that some of the servicing reviews will go through?
Well, the entire application goes through a rigorous review. And so when I said we're in circulation, that means it gets reviewed by, I think it's about 65 specialists. This gets sent out to fire. It goes to NMAX. It goes to all the shallow utility providers. It goes through the engineering department. So stormwater, sanitary service, it gets looked at from all angles, including that the transportation impact assessment. There'll be roads specialists that will be looking at the cross sections, looking at the line assignments in any improvements we make there. So it gets fully vetted. It goes to the school boards. I just know the list is long. And so that process they have about a month to review, and they review that supporting report that Vern mentioned that we have put on our website. That supporting report is what they use as a basis, as well as studies that we submit. And so they go through that process, and we typically then get comments, and it might be clarifying comments. It might be, can you do additional analysis? Can you consider something else? Like, we'll get a host. Sometimes it's 100 comments. Sometimes it's 200 comments. It's been a long time since I've seen less than 100, but we'll have to manage those and address those. And so the process has some unknown timelines, because we could go through 2 rounds of comments. We could go through 4 rounds of comments. It depends on the analysis, and it depends on what gets, discovered, even as the city looks at, especially in our established areas. We've got infrastructure that's been in the ground for a number of years. And so there's some additional investigation they do. So it's a process, and all of those stakeholders will be reviewing it. And so it's many layers of analysis.
And on that, we had a couple questions about school capacity, area school capacity, as well as emergency service capacity, and how that gets factored in.
Yeah. And with them being part of that circulation process, they will also be able to weigh in. They will be able to look the existing school boards. So it could be, you'll have the CBE and the Catholic School Board, and any other groups. There's the Francophone board also looks, they get circulated. So They will do their review and identify if they have issues with their catchment areas, or if they, where they're sitting as far as anticipated students, and they'll work it off the maximum numbers as well. They'll do they'll have a calculation that they look at when they've got multifamily and how many kids that they would expect. So they'll do that review. The same review would happen with fire and EMS. If it's something that's identified as maxing out their capacity, that gets identified as well, and so becomes a discussion with administration, and sometimes it hits the political level if it needs to. But if there's, say, we see this more in new communities than I'd say in existing communities, because we have existing facilities within our existing communities. But in new communities, as development happens, they may not have a fire hall that's in the proper distance that it needs to be, or EMS. So it's something that does get reviewed. And if there is a shortfall, it becomes a conversation, and it typically becomes an administrative conversation on how they can manage that. And hopefully it doesn't indicate that you need a new facility.
And I have to apologize. I misunderstood a point that someone's making, and thank you for people clarifying. Just going back to the discussion on Curry Barracks, that I think it was a point of comparison. So they're proposing 5,000 units, and I know we don't probably have the numbers off the top of our head, but they're proposing 5,000 units on 300 acres, and we're proposing 2,500 units on 11 acres. And I guess the question is, how will that work? How does that work?
It's a very good question. We did Curry many years ago. I'm trying to remember all the final numbers. I would have to go back and confirm if those are the accurate numbers that were. I know it's been approved at quite a large intensity. And I do think it projected more than that, but I will take that away, and I will look at that and answer that question as part of the feedback that we have after, and give a little bit more of a succinct answer as to, how did the two compare.
Yeah,
but I'll take that one away.
I apologize for representing that question incorrectly. So thank you for the clarification. We're appreciating the clarification people are providing in the chat. Okay. Do you mind just going back to the LAP? No, actually, let's go back to the building, the heights, because we have a question. They felt that there was a bit of a misleading slide with the fact that the current housing across the street on 25th Street is actually 1 story and not 3. So just need to explain the intent of this.
Absolutely, and that's a fair comment to make as well. What this shows what the local area plan has identified as appropriate redevelopment opportunity. When they have comprehensive sites that are near transit, it goes back to that slide I showed about the transit station areas. So when the local area plan was reviewed, they said, here's a station area. How do we transition out? We talked about the core zone and the transition zone, and they came to the conclusion that it would be a reasonable transition to have these blocks to the west up to 4 stories. The blocks to the south up to 3 stories, and these backside blocks 3 stories, and the one across where the commercial is up to 6 stories, given the location of the transit zone. And so that doesn't mean it's you must. The houses across the street can exist as houses across the street. They could be replaced as the same type of form. They can go in as, a bungalow or a 2-story. Certainly it shows the opportunity of a transition area, and the availability that the way they looked at it was how it would transition to that comprehensive area, and ultimately to that transit station zone that we have on Crowchild. So I agree that's not the current state. I think I noted that in the presentation. It's not a must, you must do if you were to redevelop, but it definitely is giving some opportunity there, long-term opportunity.
Thank you. I'm just looking for a few more questions. We've had a lot of really good ones come in. Oh, interesting one. Has there been any consideration giving to green spaces on top of buildings? Because this would increase the total green space in the community.
I'm going to throw that one over to Nora. If she'd like to answer that one, please do.
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, we're not into technical building design yet. I can say Minto has done green roofs in the past often, and we have 2 examples in Calgary where we have created kind of amenity spaces for residents at the top of buildings. We have one in Bridgeland, one in Kensington. So that's something that we certainly look to incorporate into design anywhere we can get people outside and add some green elements and sustainable elements. So those are really good comments, and keep them coming so that we make sure that we integrate them into our future building design.
And that's become something that we've seen quite a bit throughout the city, is using those roof spaces for amenities. Whether it's just additional outdoor spaces, including, you know, some balconies and whatnot. So it's definitely something that I think it's valued when you can actually add green to an upper floor. So we've seen it throughout, but that's definitely something when you get to the building stage that you can consider, Nora.
Absolutely.
And Kathy, while we're on the slide, we did have some comments regarding the restricted covenant that that's on some of the sites surrounding. So just a point to, I know that's been a discussion even through the LAP process that the community's dealt with. So just to FYI that some comments are coming in about the existing situation of the restricted covenant.
And that's fair. And restrictive covenants, it seemed to be a classic pattern. I live on the west side as well, and I also have one on my property. It was something that was established back, you know, a lot of them were late 50s, early 50s, late 50s. It was a way to regulate. It was a way, you know, the land use bylaw was a little bit different back then. It was a way to regulate it was almost like regulating by district. You know, this is what this intention is. And certainly I know they exist, and they do exist a lot through a lot of the communities on the west side. We didn't have any restrictions on this site, but acknowledge that is present in the area.
Thank you. And I do want to also just take a moment to acknowledge we are getting a lot of comments just generally about the 2,500 and the 2,500 units and the 30 stories. A lot of comments about the people feeling that it's inappropriate for the neighborhood given the current situation and the current setting. So I just want to acknowledge that those comments are coming in, we are receiving them and we're noting them. So
yeah, we acknowledge we received some of those as well earlier today. So appreciate the comments and appreciate the ability for you to express your opinions.
Great. Yeah, and again, thank you for your time, everybody, today as well. A little bit on timeline and approval. So if this project is approved, how long would construction possibly take, and when would it start? So the
Sure.
two questions we're getting most
Sure.
common.
And that's a question I'd love to have Nora or Alex answer about what you think or Tom, whoever would like to take that one.
Generally speaking, we're looking at build out anywhere between 5 and 10 years. I assume that a lot of the feedback around these questions are people aren't loving the fact of living in a construction zone for an extended period of time. So I can imagine where all of those are coming. We do our best during construction period to be able to mitigate those things. And maybe Alex, if you just don't mind adding a few details to that, that'd be great.
Yeah, for sure. So we're definitely being cognizant of what the construction process is going to look like. So we're going to continue to do some studies as we further develop our concept plans, looking for ways to mitigate construction traffic, dust, debris, noise, obviously working within kind of standard construction hours. So I know there was a good comment that came up at a previous session about construction access off Crowchild, and it's certainly something that we're brought up with the city and are exploring. So looking into ways to make that happen. So yeah, we're definitely cognizant of it, and we'll be doing construction and traffic management plans throughout the course of development and as we work out our phasing of the development itself.
Maybe stay on the line because a couple of I think we answered this question a little bit, but with regards to sort of commitment or guarantees, what is once approved, if approved, will this development proceed and start to build out in a reasonable period of time? And I think there's been a few discussions around the sort of languishing state of Curry development and some of the other developments around the area.
Yes, so we like to build in a sequential order. That's better for our business and that's better for the community. So that's our intention, that we kind of go building by building through the site and develop in a continuous manner.
Thanks. Do we have any sense of the number of phases at this time, or how the site will be phased?
We don't yet. That's something that we'll get into more details as we progress through the process. So we don't have the certainty of the phasing yet.
Thank you. Okay, Amrit, I think there's quite a few more transportation and traffic related questions that have come back in. So we're going to jump back into some of those. We have, we still, just to also do a little check-in here. I think we started the session with about 60 attendees at one point. We're now down to 43. So if people do have to jump off, we do understand. Again, this session's being recorded, and we are also documenting all the questions that are coming into us through the chat function, and they will be incorporated to our feedback form and our frequently asked questions document and our engagement summary. So we do it while we understand if people have to leave. There's going to be many ways to be able to catch up on the content. So, diving in, what is the percentage increase above current traffic? So what is the absolute and percentage increase above the current vehicular traffic along 26th Avenue? Richmond Road, 29th Street. Is there any way to speak to that?
Sure. Sorry, I'm gonna have to. I don't have the percentages off my top of my head, so I'm gonna have to go quickly through our report to get the exact numbers.
No worries.
And I guess when we, I know there's another question about in terms of what we've assumed in terms of our the parking rates in the study. So I'll just answer that while I go through
Yes,
this.
thank
So in terms of what we've assumed, so that's more for the traffic generation. The rates we've used was for a suburban development with limited transit. So those type of developments have parking rates that are much higher than 1 for 1. So they're looking at 1.4 stalls per unit. So that's not what we did that to be conservative, so that we provide a traffic assessment that accounts for vehicle generation, so that we're not undercounting the potential traffic, but the actual traffic generated likely will be lower. But in terms of what we've used in our study, was a higher rate. And I guess there was also a question of, did we account for Richmond Green? So we did. So as part of the study, we do discuss with the city in terms of what developments to account for. So we did include Richmond Green in our study in terms of a layer on top of current flow traffic flows. So when we're looking at the volume increase that we're expecting here, so let's give a comparison of 25th Street and 26th Avenue. So we would see a growth at that intersection to about 1,800 vehicles per hour, where right now that's about 1,200. But when we're going back historically, we had situations where there were certain intersections where the volumes are similar to what we're forecasting in the future, and there's certain intersections where we're going to have we will have an increase. Like I think the example is 29th Street and 33rd Avenue. So so that's the major intersection where we going back to the volumes there, they were actually higher going back to the 1990s than they are currently, but we are expecting those volumes to increase back up as development occurs, including this development.
Thanks, Amit. And there's a question that came in as well. There's currently a multi-use pathway along Crowchild Trail that people use. Is there the opportunity that this can be kept or upgraded as part of the project? And that overall, this person is sort of excited by the connectivity to the BRT and cycling infrastructure. So if you could speak to some of the access across, or the site access and connectivity.
So I could first run, yeah. So certainly as part of the application, the intent is to maintain and improve connectivity. So to both for residents living in this building, but also people just passing through. So the intention is to have that cycling connectivity provided.
Okay, great. And just clarifying that you did state 1.4 stalls per unit. Is that correct?
Yeah, to just clarify that is what the assumption is for suburban multifamily in Calgary and Edmonton. That is not like what we're expecting the actual demand, but that's what our traffic is being generated on to be conservative.
Perfect. Okay, moving down, because again, quite a few.
I just want to clarify that the question was, are we going to keep the existing pathway that was along Crowchild? I don't know that we've fully determined. I know we're trying to create a different link through our site. we'll take that away as a something to discuss to keep that one pathway and have an additional one. We certainly can discuss that, but I don't want it to think that we're keeping both automatically. We'll have that, we'll discuss that. I don't know that we intended to have both of them. We thought we'd put an improved pathway in, but we'll note that and have a discussion about that.
Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Emma. A question. So 2,500 units will bring a lot of traffic to the area, and at present, the BRT only runs every 10 minutes at peak hours. So what is our assessment of the current transit system, and will we be lobbying to increase for more bus routes, schedules, or a more integrated system in the area? This person just also notes that there's not that many grocery stores that are easily accessed through transit from this area at the moment.
I can answer yes. So in terms of what the city said is they've identified in their route ahead plan recently that they want to improve frequencies on certain corridors. So this Crochell Trail, the BRT, is a specific corridor they've identified that they want to improve frequencies. So there certainly will be a need to improve frequencies on the route, both based on city's current policies, but also to support the build out of the neighborhood.
And just to answer that question, I think there has been some discussions on does the route change? Are there opportunities to bring it through Curry? I think that's up for us to discuss. I think we want to talk about transit in general. We feel it needs to have an improved service and should. And so that tends to come with more riders. If there's more riders on there, you tend to get that level of improvement. But I think this area, given the development that's going to proceed and happen, there's definitely lots of conversations about where the ultimate routes for transit are, and that might help. But there's likely going to be some future grocery opportunities in Curry, and maybe that there could be a more direct route. Just to answer that is just we acknowledge that it's not ideal at the moment with transit and groceries. So I think there's lots of discussions we're going to have with transit.
Yeah. Nora, I'm just jumping over to you. Just we're still getting a few clarifying questions on the parking.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify the parking. I will defer to Amrit because I am not a technical transportation engineer on the numbers that went into the study. From a Minto perspective, that's one of those things, number of parking stalls, that falls further into the process for us. So we don't have a total traffic assumption yet. It's based on kind of building use. For example, if we were looking at seniors, we may have less parking. If we were looking at a building that was kind of catered to young families, then we might have more parking. So we don't have an exact number of parking units known for this development. Our technical studies are based upon kind of averages seen in other projects. And if Amrit has anything to add to that, I'll defer to him.
Yeah, no, we assume a typical multifamily, which is not senior. So seniors have lower traffic generation. To be conservative, we just assume typical multifamily development, but there are different types of multifamily that do have lower parking rates than what we've assumed.
Yeah. So just to echo some of the comments, just to sort of share a comment that we are getting, because it's quite consistent with some of the feedback we heard by email. The entire community of Richmond currently contains less than 5,000 dwellings. So adding a traffic light to one single intersection will be insufficient to address this increase in density. Will there be some sort of requirement to provide a formal study of the impacts to community access? When the school was operating, there were 10-minute backlogs just to get out of the community. So just some history there, because there's a lot of residents who have lived in the community since this while the school was operational.
Sure, I can take the so in terms of we have submitted a transportation impact assessment to the city. It's a what we call a version 1 report. So the city will review that to see if they agree with the conclusions, if they want us to assess different infrastructure improvements. So we've submitted one report which we've identified the improvements listed on this figure here, but there may be additional infrastructure improvements that the city may identify through the review, and that's part of the process.
Thanks. Oh, can you, actually, another question on that, we discussed this earlier, so for people who maybe have joined a bit late, can you reconfirm that access to 33rd is not an option, and why is it not an option?
Yeah, I can, so going back a long time, there used to be that connection. So we at this point have not proposed the connection through there. If there, but so all of our traffic analysis is based off the current road network, which does not have a connection to 33rd via 25th Street. But again, the city, as part of their review process, has the ability to ask us to assess alternate access scenarios, and if they do, we would provide them with the analysis results in that scenario. But it's not been asked for at this point, and we're not proposing it at this point.
If I would suggest that if there's an opinion either way on that access point and you are wanting to share it, that's probably great information for us to include in our summary, to either have a, depending on what we hear, just, and there might be mixed comments on that access, and certainly the analysis will probably, like the analysis that the city does might trigger that for them to consider it as an open one, but we'd certainly be interested in having the perspective of the community on that access point.
It's coming in loud and strong right now. There's quite a few people that would really, I think, not want to see that open. So
Okay, and that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I predicted might be the response. I just was, I want to make sure that we're getting that feedback from the community.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sorry, just want to add one point, because it came out regarding emergency access. So there may be likely potentially a connection where it's emergency vehicles only, so it's gated to allow a connection for fire or EMS, but not allow regular vehicle traffic.
Full vehicular traffic.
So as part of the study area for the traffic assessment, was there any sort of, so I guess, what were the impacts of the traffic? Was there any consideration for the intersection at Richmond Road and Crowchild exit gets backed up at 26 very frequently? Did we look at this at all? Richmond Road and Crowchild.
So that would Richmond Road, and I'm not sure if that is really looking at adding a connection, and adding a new access onto Crowchild. So it's similar to the 33rd Avenue discussion. We did not propose that connection, so we did not assess a scenario where we had that in. But again, the city will review our report, and they'll identify what they want to be tested. And so at this point, we have not been asked, and we haven't proposed it.
There was some conversation too, just around, oh, sorry, this is the exit to Crowchild at the Old Children's Hospital. Right, so where it connects, really quite actually, further north and a bit east.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, there's a comment that came through. I think when we were discussing the comparable levels to the traffic volumes of the school to current times, and someone just wanted to mention that they disagree with the vehicle count, comparing the existing, the proposed 2,500 to what was to the school's students. There was never, when you consider the population, what that expands to, there was never that population of students at the school. So just a point there that they wanted to make to address.
That's valid. Yeah. And it's been a number of years since the school has been there in full fashion. I mean, I think back if it closed in, what did I say? It was 85 it closed. You know, there's definitely a change that we've seen, even just with high schools comparable today, you know, versus, you know, 85. I think in 85, we all walked everywhere. We all did everything local. Yeah. I'm dating myself now.
Someone just wants to clarify, so I think at one point we said 6,900 vehicles per day, and they're clarifying that this means there are currently 1,900 vehicles per day, and that adding 2,500 units is contributing to 5,000 vehicles per day. Can you verify?
Well, yeah, the difficulty with that is so when we look at vehicle volumes, it's for a section of roadway block by block, so it's gonna vary based on which road we're talking about. And we're also, when we're looking at existing, but we're also accounting for other developments. So when I'm talking about future, I'm including the developments that the city wants us to account for, including the the Richmond Green, the Curry Barracks, and the other development on Richmond Road as well. So I'm just gonna pull up, and I don't have the numbers exactly off the top of my head.
And it probably
So-
makes a difference too, Amrit, if you've got a grid-based structure and just like you said, you look at it block by block, because you could have people dispersing at different blocks, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so when I was talking about that Richmond Road, we were looking at vehicle volumes. They're about currently in that range of 3,000 to 4,000 vehicles per day, and going up to that range of 6,000 to 7,000 vehicles per day.
And I just want to clarify, I spoke too soon. There was one comment where someone, or there was a couple of comments supporting examining or studying opening the access to 33rd again. So it wasn't exclusively a resounding no. There was a couple of people that would like to see the access opened up again. Okay, we are getting actually to some of the end of the questions. I'm just going through to make sure I have gotten to them. So just give me a moment here. Oh yeah, okay. So the BRT is currently right under 26th Avenue. Why would it need to be moved?
Sorry. Okay. So it is under 26, but it's north of or closer to the north end of that overpass. And so in terms of when we're looking at supporting transit service and usage, you want the transit service to be closest to the largest number of transit users. So when we're looking at development of this site, we're going to have because there's a little more density in that location, so you'd want to move the stop closer to make it more convenient for transit users. So that's why we're proposing moving it closer, and also looking at improving the supporting facilities there. So right now it's just a standard shelter, and you're located sitting next to a very high volume roadway. So
Not the nicest stop.
So the opportunity with moving it closer is putting it closer to the residents, but also providing improved facilities to make it a more comfortable stop.
Okay. We had a question. Oh, is there going to be proposed parking parking for the BRT? Is there going to be any new parking?
There will be no proposed dedicated parking for the BRT.
Yeah. Okay. We had a comment come through, and so we did have a slide highlighting the benefits to the community. We had a comment, for our consideration. What we shared the benefits, but what might be some of the negative impacts? And certainly, I know when we were discussing some of the construction and the pieces, we did address some of what can be the negative impacts through development. Kathy, did you want to speak to any of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's change. It's adding density to a site. We know, and it's mostly you've got an open field and you've got, a school. The school part, it's unfortunate right now. It's not in the best repair, so it's certainly more of a hazard than a benefit. But we recognize that it's it is an open space right now too. We're saying we can create different types of open spaces, but it definitely is an open space. And so I think we recognize that. And having development. So, if you put it on the other side, we've talked a lot about it tonight, traffic. And certainly our goal is to try and make improvements. I think we talked a little bit about curb extensions, and those are kind of those bulb outs that we see that kind of, help pedestrians. And that became kind of our improvements. At the same time, some of those might reduce parking a little bit at those corners that you would normally park at. So there might be a negative that comes there. We think there's an opportunity to provide trees back. There are trees existing on the fields. We can but they come back in a different type of line assignment, and they come back as more as a structured tree. Other negatives, I don't know if our team can think of other things. I think it's the biggest will just be the impact of having built form adjacent to you. But we certainly hope that we can improve the transit and improve, other elements that you might not have today that might be a benefit. So it's kind of a mixed. I think the negatives definitely, many of you would probably say the fact that there's, the site will be is being proposed to be maximized with building and development is probably a negative, but we recognize it's change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't want to cut anyone else off if they had anything to add. We are getting close to the hour, and I think I'd like to save time for 2 more questions because it does lead nicely into next steps. So I just wanted to flag that. And let me just find where I left off in the document. Oh, will there be any representation from the city, like in terms of file manager or counselor at the event tomorrow in person?
Very good question. We certainly have let the counselor's office know. I will ask Vern to pop back on and let me know if he had any indication if our file planner was planning to attend. Do you know?
We met with them yesterday and they weren't intending on attending because it is early in the process. We've just made the application and I suspect that they'll probably come out to a future event.
And then I guess also to note there, like the application is now formally in circulation, and so there is the opportunity for people to provide comment through the development map, and so that process through the city has also officially started. So while we are collecting your feedback and we'll be communicating it, you can still comment to the city as well.
Yes. And you should note the city, they've got FOIP rules. We don't get information about who comments. They will provide us with a summary of comments that are received there. They sometimes, they don't provide us verbatim comments. If you're interested, we certainly would love a copy. If you're going to send to the city and you want to provide it, and you can provide it on all those different ways that we talked about, by email or through our website. We are able to respond. We made a commitment to the community association that we would note all comments that are received. We would have that available. We're not going to summarize it, but for us to understand fully some of your comments, we may not get that directly from the city. We might just get a summary. So I just want to note that as much as we would love as much information that you want to share. Or comments, and we can package those into our considerations as we start to address comments.
Yeah, and I want to say thanks again that we've still got 35 people attending. We know this project is of very real interest to the community, so thank you for the time tonight. I have one last question before we do a couple of housekeeping items. We did share a link to our online feedback form as well a link to the website. So there's content that is there as well as that feedback form that is open. We're keeping it open until sort of just before Christmas, but our hope is that we're getting you guys a response as well to the most frequently asked questions and the frequently asked questions we received before Christmas. So if you get your feedback in, that would be great in the next few weeks here. Nora or Alex, also if you want to jump on, one of the questions we received was, can we comment on why Minto went ahead with a development application before doing public engagement or community engagement? And I think we can speak to that too, on the complexity of the site and of course lots of discussion that happened around it. But just wanted to sort of leave on that note from engagement as we are looking at more engagement tomorrow night and into the future.
Absolutely. We are at the beginning of a very long process, and yes, we had some communication with the community association more about process and timing this summer. We wanted to go forward with an application so we have a starting point, and we want to have a place where people can provide that comment. And we thought this was a great place to do it. And so by having online, by having in person, by having continuous communication back and forth, we can make sure that we get those comments and that people are commenting on an actual concept rather than just theory.
And I'm going to add to that as well. It's important to have the technical studies, and you all know this has been, I'd say, the crux of the comments that we've seen tonight. Engaging ahead of time, it doesn't help us know where we're sitting with some of those technical elements. If the city comes back and says, this is not happening for this technical reason, this will be a conversation that we have. We can at least then pivot and have you know, the next bit of conversations that relate back to what does that concept mean. And so we appreciate the comments of dialogue, you know, ahead of time. It was important for us to spend the time. We actually, the time gap from the purchase to now was doing all the studies, and really we're trying to understand the area and if there are complexities. So it is the start. We will be out in person tomorrow night and speaking to those that want to come out that say couldn't come tonight or do want to have, you know, a conversation with us. And then we will be back having further dialogue. So a lot of it was just making sure that we at least understood the parameters of some of those studies, and it kind of all aligned, and here we are making it formal so that your comments do come in a formal way and are documented formally.
Yeah. So yeah, I think on behalf of the project team, we do appreciate your time this evening. And I know many of you are also registered for tomorrow evening's event, and we appreciate that time as well. We look forward to speaking with you in person. The team here is going to be there in person, so you'll have a chance to chat with us. Again, all the questions that have been logged through the chat function are being logged and compiled with all the questions we've received by email, and all the questions and comments we're going to be receiving tomorrow night and through the feedback form. So we're getting quite a few questions, a lot of consistency that we sort of were sharing through the themes and discussion tonight. And we do look forward to sharing a response with you guys in the coming weeks. And again, we look forward to seeing you tomorrow evening. Anything else to add, Nora or Alex or Kathy, before we sign off?
No, just appreciative of you spending the last 2 hours with us to let us overview the project. So thank you for that.
Okay.
Agreed. Thank you.
Thanks,
I'm
everyone.
sure we'll see most of you tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay, take care, guys. And yeah, so see you tomorrow. And again, all the content's on the website. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, we're done.